Welcome to the Remnant Podcast. I'm Paula,
And I'm Carrie.
and again, we are going to do something a little different today. We are going to dive into part two of our series of interviewing a sex trafficking survivor. We have Whitney with us again today, and she's going to share a little more information and get a little bit more in depth of the trafficking that she experienced. So, Whitney, last week when we talked about you being a teenager and being in TYC, and you said how you felt empowered, and that's why you would actually go there often, like on purpose. So, what happened after you left TYC? Did you go back to school or no?
No. So when I left TYC, I was actually on parole. I did all right on parole. While I was in TYC, I figured out, I could sing and I knew how to write poems and songs and stuff. So when I got out, I just knew I was going to get famous, right? So I started trying to pursue that. Of course, I met some cool people, but I also met, some not so cool people doing that. And after I left, I really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I got a job at CC's Pizza, and that lasted about 2 weeks. I also, I was staying with my mom, and at this time, she had met a guy that was way younger than her. He lived with her, and she's been in Alcoholics Anonymous since, before I was born. And she started drinking again, and so I started drinking with her. And things got weird, whenever you cross the line between friend and parent, things get really weird, and the respect that you have for that person kind of, blurs into trying to challenge her, And so I ended up hanging out with a girl I had actually met on parole. I was on parole with her, and we became really good friends, and we did everything together. She'd spend the night at my house, I'd spend the night at her house, and she had introduced me to a guy named Mo. He was, from what I thought at first, he was a drug dealer. When you're, 18, you think that's the coolest thing in the world. They got money, they got a car, and then, he's showing interest in me. I was still kind of fat at the time, so I had no self-respect, and I didn't really know, I thought it seemed cool, and we had the same birthday.
Okay.
So I thought that was a sign from the heavens above that we were meant to be, and my life just kind of went downhill after I met him. He had a few girls working for him. They were, being trafficked by him. At the time, I thought, I didn't see it as being trafficked. I thought it was I don't know. I still kind of have a problem, or not a problem, but the way I view it, is still kind of shame and guilt, and it was me, I did something to make them think that, hey, I wanted that, but so we started doing what I thought was dating, and he eventually, ended up telling me, oh, hey, one of my girls can't do this, will you take this date for her? I'll never ask you to do it again. So I was a little hesitant at first, but I ended up doing it. I ended up puking all over the guy afterwards, the guy that I saw. He was disgusted, but and I was too. When you're younger, you just set these morals in place, and you just, those things you say you're never going to do. Oh, I'll never do that, And I had just totally crossed the line with that for a person who obviously didn't even care about me.
Gotcha. So basically, you thought you were in a relationship.
Yeah.
With Mo.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it started.
That's how it started.
And then he asked you to do a favor for him.
Mm-hmm.
So did that favor become persistent? Did he start asking you to do that more frequently?
He didn't ask me anymore. He started telling me.
Okay.
He started getting like violent, emotionally and physically abusive, and I wasn't even on drugs then. And I remember in a 6-month like period, I ended up losing like 50, 60 pounds. Just from getting abused, from the stress of like, dang, is he gonna beat me up today? Or I'm walking on eggshells, making sure I don't upset him, so I don't have to pay for it, And he just did everything to humiliate and degrade me. I've never to this day, like I've never met. In my eyes, that was the devil, And I don't know that I'll ever be the same because of that, But like I remember times, I would have to wear his clothes. Whenever I was seeing clients, they would ask me, what happened to my face. I always had bruises, my black eyes, my nose. He broke my nose once. He broke my nose because the girl next to us, he thought, she liked me and I liked her. Because we were wearing the same color shirt one day. He was insane. He would look at the billboards, and it was like some movie called like Good and Evil or Angel and Devil, or it was something like that. And he like had knocked me out one day in the car, and he was like, yeah, those billboards are what the police are telling me you're doing. And I was like thinking in my head, what are you talking about? First of all, like, you're not that important that the police would do you a favor like that, And secondly, I'm around you all the time, Like, I just didn't understand it. And I remember asking him one day, why he used to hit me, and he was his response was that he didn't ever want any other guy to see what he saw in me.
Wow.
Wow.
How long were you involved with him?
It was like 9 months.
9 months. Okay.
I just wanted to bring something up, Whitney, for the listeners, because I think your experience is also very common of others that have go through this trafficking experience, this horrific experience, is that it starts out kind of like a boyfriend, like you said, very much hearing what you want to hear. There's no signs of abuse.
Yeah, he would stick up for me if anybody else, at first, if anybody else would say anything to me. And that's why it was just like I had never experienced something like that before. Prior to being involved with him, I had never even seen anything like that before. So I was just so, I think, in shock, like that, like this was happening to me, and it was just, it was unreal.
And from what point of meeting Mo and kind of going through that dating type relationship or kind of Romeo experience or whatever you want to call it, from the time, when did that start to the time where something just flipped?
It was about like 3 weeks or a month.
Okay, so it wasn't right away. I think
no, not
a lot
at all.
of listeners, it's important to understand that it's not like the abuse starts right away.
No.
That there's a trust that starts building,
Yeah.
a relationship that starts building that's very genuine and real most of the time.
Yeah.
And then one day there's a flip that
Yep.
like you're describing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. It's that one day when they ask you to do a favor.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because you've built up that trust in them, and so you're not thinking that this is something you're going to have to keep doing. You're trying to show them that you can be trusted, that you love them, and you want to do what, they're asking you to do.
Mm-hmm.
So during this time when you were with him and you serviced, guys or whatever, how many would you service, like, in a day's time?
The most was probably like 6 or 7. But it was not only that he was having me do. He was having me like seek out other girls. I actually, I was charged when I was, I think I was like 18. I was charged with a compelling prostitution charge. because I had sought out a girl on, I think it was like Moco Space, and he was like telling me what to say, and of course my picture was up there, and so she, thought we were friends. We went and picked her up. She was 16, he was 29, and I was 18, and he would. Have sex with her in front of me. He would beat me up in front of her just to humiliate me. So that was her thinking that, oh, he won't ever do this to me. I remember one time he was about to have sex with another girl in front of both of us, and she was like, I won't let him hit you. And I was like, girl, do you know what he'll do if if you try to stick up for me? Like, just don't even get involved. It's going to be worse for you.
Wow. So, what was that turning point? What made you leave him, or how did you leave that situation?
Oh, the only way I could leave is by going to jail. I went to jail for the compelling prostitution. We were actually in Farmers Branch at a hotel, and he had kicked me. I was confronting him. It was the day after me and her had talked on the elevator, and he was, I was crying. I was in the bathroom and I was crying. And he was like cussing me out, and he kicked me in the chest into the bathtub. And he tore a ligament in my chest. And we were about to go somewhere, and I was like crying and stuff. Well, when we get off the elevator, I was just like thinking in my mind, like on the elevator down, like, if I just take off and run, as soon as the elevator opens, first of all, he won't catch me. And second, somebody's going to see us in the hall. So he won't be bold enough to try to come and run after me. Boy, was I wrong. I took off running when we got to when the elevator, opened up, and there was this big old dude at the end of the hallway. He seen him chase me, and he was like, "Hey, man." And Mo was like, that's my girl, you know what I mean? Like, mind your own business. So we end up like walking to the store or something, and the police stop us. My sister's a year older than me, but I knew her birthday, and her name, and I used her name. Mm-hmm. And they asked us for our name and stuff like that. She used her sister's name, and I used my sister's name. And they let us go. So we get back to the hotel room. They call us, and they tell us we're kicked out. So we're like moving all of our stuff, and I had called my mom to come pick us up. Well, my mom gets there, and as we're loading the last bag in the car, the police like pull up on us, and my mom like lets her window down, and she was like, they were like had me, they had me like not in handcuffs yet, but they were like walking me over there, and she was like, "Hey, what are you doing with my daughter?" And he was like, she lied about her name, and she was like, "What?" And they ended up arresting me. It was really one of those things you think is the worst thing in the world at the time, but it was a blessing in disguise. I spent like 3 months in jail. He ended up bonding me out, and I went back to my mom's house, and he ends up like showing up with like 3 different girls, and he was like my mom's boyfriend that I was talking about earlier, like he let him in, and I told him I didn't want to go with him. I was just so tired of that. Like I couldn't even, he wouldn't even like let me talk to my mom. He would cuss my mom out, and that's how I ended up getting away from him.
Okay. So after you left him, did you meet somebody else?
I still stayed in contact with him. I did meet somebody else though. That was more like, he was more like a relationship though, but I ended up, I think at that point, like I said, I was shocked at how Mo treated me, but at the same time, I was almost addicted to that abuse, in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, I've never had somebody love me that much. He gets that mad, he is that jealous, mm-hmm. He loves me so much. Like, that's awesome, in my mind. And now, like, looking back, I was seeking that out through different people. And I met like several different people, you know, and the relationships always ended up like very toxic. Like it always ended up me prostituting for, you know, some guy who was either on drugs, you know, or who was had like a real job but didn't mind that I did that, you know, like that. Obviously they still took the money, and it just always ended up like that, no matter how I intended for it to end up, you know. In my mind, it was like, you know, somebody had degraded me with that, with you know, selling my body. So, you know, it was my way of almost in my mind thinking that, hey, I'm doing it for myself now. They, you know, everybody else is taken from me, you know, what, you know, degraded me and taken that from me. So I'm going to go ahead and do it for myself now.
So you felt like you had control by doing it yourself.
Yeah, crazy enough, but I did.
So you said something. You said when you were with Mo, you didn't do drugs to get through anything. So when did the drug use start?
It was like on and off, like, you know, like experimental stuff, like with X and cocaine, and, you know, I would drink every now and then, and marijuana, you know. That was when I was like 19 and 20, and when I turned like 21, I went on to, you know, heroin and meth and crack at one point, you know. And it was just my way of coping through everything I had let happen to me.
I think there's an important aspect of what you're talking about is that the control. You know, we keep saying the word control, and something we teach in our education and our claim is that you never underestimate the amount of control a trafficker has over a victim, no matter if they're present in the room or not. And for you, he had control over everything you dressed, everything you did. And it sounds like drugs was not a major player when you were with Mo. Is that right?
They weren't a player at all. Like it was crazy because most of the time we ended up so broke that, we could barely afford to stay at a hotel room, you know?
It was abuse. It was constant abuse that was a force of control.
Yes.
Rather than using drugs
Yes.
in this period of your life with this with this pimp.
Yes.
Another thing, as you've been talking, and as Paul and I have talked about before, is just that Stockholm syndrome, that trauma bonds, you know, and that's what you were experiencing. You have related and with that person for survival, right? Like, because you had to, in order to survive. It's literally that trauma you were going through, and that really, really strong bond that was connected, like you said. Like, you thought he was loving you by beating you, and just how real that trauma bond is in your life, and how twisted and brainwashed. I think you've used the word brainwashed before.
Yes.
That's exactly what was happening.
Okay. So I want to ask you this question. How long there was Mo, and then there were a few others. How long would you say you were being trafficked or in the life, whether he was asking you to sleep with other men, or whether you took control and said, hey, this is what I'm going to do for myself? How long would you say that lasted in your life?
From 17 to like 28.
Okay. So about 11 years. Gotcha. And I want to go back to the drug use, because that is it almost kind of goes hand in hand when it comes to trafficking. So did the drug use get progressively worse, or did
it always does. It's a progressive illness. Addiction is. It got worse to where I started, like, literally self-mutilating when when I started doing heroin, I mean, I started out, I think 21, was the, or like when I was around 20, was like, I feel like the best I've ever looked. From 20 to like 22, I look like a totally different person. I mean, heroin sucked the life out of me, literally. I was so skinny, bags under my eyes, I was pale, and I would look in the mirror and just think that that was cute, And everybody around me would ask me if I was sick. I walked like I leaned over when I walked and stood up. Like it looked like I had, back problem, really bad back problems. And I was the only one who didn't realize that, that was how I looked. I had track marks all up and down my arms, constant visits to the ER to remove abscesses. It was just really bad. I had needles like get stuck in my arm, and I just like guys would meet me and be like, "Oh, you're too pretty to be doing that," and I'd be like, I would kind of feed off of that. I'd be like, don't try to save me, just like give me my drugs. And I just didn't care about anything. I had no sense of hope. Like I felt like that was how it was going to be forever. I was cool with ODing, like that was probably how I was going to die, and all the prepaid friends that I had, because, for our friendship to work, they definitely have to benefit off of, me somehow. So, whether it be drugs or money or just a place to stay, that's what our friendship consisted of. And I had just succumbed to the fact that, this is how things were. It doesn't get any better for me, and just deal with it,
All right. I have two questions. Hopefully I remember the second one. But this one, as it relates to the drug use, as it relates to trafficking. When you were being trafficked, when you were doing it for yourself, especially when you were doing it for Mo, did you make money? Did you pocket the money, or did the money go to him?
When I was with Mo, I barely even touched the money.
Okay.
I barely ever even touched the money. When I was doing it for myself, if I was with a guy, to make myself feel better, I would keep like $40. If it was like for $200 or $250, I'd keep like $40 and give them the rest, And it was just like what's understood don't have to be explained, But I don't know. It's different when you give somebody something. It's cool, but when they start expecting it, regardless of whatever your understanding is, it becomes a problem, So it was always like conditional. Oh, okay, well you can't make money. I'm gonna go out and hang out with my friends, or what I mean. So, yeah.
So, and the reason I asked, because I know with young girls, it's almost kind of presented to them as though they'll have this lavish lifestyle,
Yeah.
and be able to buy this and buy that. For instance, I want to ask you, what kind of language did you use when you recruited that 16-year-old girl? Do you remember?
I don't really remember with her, but like I've had other like pimps, and I'm gonna sound stupid like talking like that now, or I'm gonna feel like then I thought it was so cool, but I would like just tell them, that they could really like have anything that they want. I always, when I was with the pimp whose name, I ended up getting tattooed on me, he like would always have me in nice clothes, perfume. My nails were always done. I had a personal trainer. I had a tanning membership. I got, butt injections. Just anything I wanted, it was literally like that, like anything I wanted, but I still didn't know how to drive. I didn't have a bank account. It was controlled in a way that was enticing, and so I presented that to other girls, and I would just like, they would see how I looked. I always had, highlights in my hair. I would show them the professional pictures that I had got done, and show them my ads online. And that was enticing enough for somebody who's already doing this, and is not really, taken care of. They would feel like, there's nothing but opportunity.
Would you say it's pretty common that that pimps will use women and other girls that they are trafficking to recruit?
Yeah, because if they're, like I said, I look the part, you know what I mean? So if a girl can show you firsthand, like, it doesn't really even, it speaks for itself, you know what I mean? But a lot of times, if the girl was nice, or, she didn't have bruises on her, like the pimp wasn't hitting her, a lot of girls that, you're talking to when you are trying to recruit are getting beat up, or, if they are on drugs, they don't have any other drugs. Their pimp is usually on drugs too. And, that wasn't the case when I was in that situation.
Yeah, I think it is important to understand, though, because I think a lot of times there is that recruiter, or what we call, right, the bottom girl, and that's the person actually being used to recruit other girls rather than, the trafficker or the pimp himself. And so I just think that's good for the listeners to understand that these girls that are being preyed on, it's not always such a big red flag of some guy. It's another person their age, or
yeah, or sometimes like a guy will ask a girl out for drinks, and make it seem like they want to go out on dates with them, and that's how it will happen, start up like that. Or just bring him around the other girls, and be like, oh, hey, I got to go somewhere real quick. Is it cool if you stay here with her real quick? And that gives ample opportunity for, his bottom girl to try to recruit this new girl. And usually they're young, a lot of pimps like getting girls who are younger. That way they're more vulnerable, and they have more time to like brainwash her and make her, more loyal to them.
It's all very calculated. You know
Yes.
exactly what they're doing.
Exactly.
Praying and yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to go back to that you had mentioned, because you said we're talking about drug use and abscesses and being sick all the time and things like that. And then earlier with Mo, you were talking about all of these injuries, like traumatic injuries, which I'm sure you didn't get to go get medical attention for all of them. But
Oh, no.
Well, that's one of my questions is, how often were you actually able to get the medical care that you needed, would you say?
When I was with Mo?
When you were with Mo?
Whenever it was like life or death, like whenever it was probably only 2 times in the whole 9 months, which, obviously he broke my nose and fractured my cheekbone. So obviously it needed to be more than that. But that time in particular, I had took a pregnancy test, and of course he said it wasn't his. I had cheated on him, even though we had been around each other. And I ended up going to the hospital because I was in a lot of pain, like in my abdomen. And we got kicked out for fighting. They called my emergency contact, who was my mom. She came pick me up, and we went back, and they told me I was having an ectopic pregnancy. And that meant that I was, I could rupture my fallopian tube and possibly like bleed out, start bleeding internally, And he had scheduled 2 clients for me to see. I did them both, and at the second one, I had noticed like some bleeding, and he was late picking me up. Whenever we had like pulled off to get on the highway to go to the emergency room, we got pulled over, and me like have been in trouble with being in trouble with the law before. I like got an attitude with the police when he asked me, where we were coming from. But he had already known. I don't know if they were like watching us or had already kind of like, saw through the situation or whatever, but he was like, while you were in there, seeing that guy, and I kind of opened my mouth to be like, hey, no, I wasn't, but he already knew. He was like, just be quiet while you were in there doing that. He was at the park trying to holler at a 14-year-old girl to prostitute for him. Her mom is who called us and why we followed you.
Wow.
That same policeman ended up taking me to the hospital himself. I told him what was going on, and he didn't even call an ambulance. He took me himself to the hospital, stayed with me the whole time. And at that point, that's when I had that compelling prostitution and a warrant out for it. And he told me that they were about to release me, and he was like, you know what, my shift is over. I'm already through with overtime. He was like, I'm going to go ahead and let you go. He was like, you'll still have a warrant, but, you need to kind of get your life together like this. You can't let a guy have control over you like that. And I think that made more of the difference rather than, the security guard at the first hospital, kicking us out. Like, even if, they didn't know what was going on, they still heard him, yelling at me. And, it could have been domestic abuse, if anything,
It seemed like he had actual insight into what was going on.
The police
policeman,
officer.
yeah.
Oh, I thought he was psychic. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, and I'm sure that was a refreshing encounter with, law enforcement.
I was totally shocked because I'm used to always, going to jail and, looking like this just troublemaker. But yeah, I was totally shocked. And for once, somebody listened to me. Somebody heard me out, listened to me, and did not judge me. Didn't look at me like I was dirty.
I love that story. One other thing I just wondering if you could talk to a little bit is being in and out of healthcare, and usually the emergency room. Was there ever a point in time where you felt like you could tell somebody what was going on?
You already know what I'm gonna say. The only time that I have really felt listened to, heard, and they cared about me was when I went to see you. And there was one other time, the time after I went to see you at the hospital. I forgot the lady's name, but I was telling her what was going on with the ectopic, the second ectopic pregnancy that I just had last year. And she was like, she knew that I did not want, that I wanted that baby. And so I'm just trying to find any excuse for why it can't be that. And, she kind of just set me down and she was like, I understand what's going on and everything, but, I just want you to know this could possibly, be devastating for you. You wouldn't be able to have babies. You could lose your life, And then I kind of made her, my doctor after that. And she was just, very, she would ask me questions. She was just, seemed very concerned about everything that was going on. And so it's just, starting last year, my medical experiences have taken I've seen them differently because usually I've got I have permanent track marks on my arms and really deep scars on my legs from drug use, cellulitis, abscesses, and so usually I'm just seen as a drug addict looking for pain meds or whatever the case is. And so just here recently, my view on medical care and I've never had insurance, so I never get to go, for a primary care doctor or whatever. But, just recently, my eyes have, my views on medical care has changed a lot.
So if you were going to go anywhere to get health care through this whole time
Baylor.
in your life, it would be the emergency room. That's where you would go.
Oh, yeah, the emergency. Yeah. Because I've never had insurance or anything like that.
Sure.
And that's the way, the only way you can be seen. But then most of the time it's if it's not life or death, they'll tell you, well, you need to consult your primary care physician. But then it's dang, if there's seriously something wrong and the doctor doesn't care enough to like, do just run like 2 more tests, or, just take one extra step to make sure you're all right, then you're screwed. What if it ends up being more serious? You don't have health care and you can't, see a primary care doctor.
Yeah. Well, and so the last thing I want to ask you, and maybe it's a different way of asking. So if during your time where you were really just using a lot and ending up in the hospital for infections and things like that, do you think for those that are medical professionals that might be listening, is there something that you think that someone could have said to you during that time that you may have trusted them enough to tell them what was really going on with you?
Like going in for abscess and stuff like that, and them are at, asking me where a good vein is. They obviously knew I was a drug addict, So when you're addicted to drugs, that's your solution at that time for some type of problem. So, seeing somebody in the ER that's addicted to drugs, I mean, it's obvious they've got track marks. They're coming in there, high as a kite. That's the only time I would go in there is when I had done all my drugs and I was like, all right, cool, I'm ready to go. Seeing somebody in that type of condition, ask questions. Don't just try to get them out of there.
You think you would have opened up and if someone had started to ask you maybe how addiction had started, or asked you a little bit more about, I mean, you don't just wake up and decide to be a heroin addict one day.
Exactly.
Right, nobody, that doesn't happen. And so
maybe if they ask what I did for a living, ask what I did for a living, because how can you be that bad on drugs with abscesses all over your legs? You're coming in there on crutches you brought, from CVS.
Right.
How are you going to even afford crutches? You haven't been to, how do you know what I'm saying? How are you going to work on crutches? So, just maybe asking more questions and not, assuming that somebody is a drug addict is at the ER just, seeking drugs. You know what I mean? Ask them what the problem is. Like, don't assume. Don't just automatically judge them.
Yeah. Thanks, Whitney.
That's pretty good. Well, guys, we have to wrap it up tonight, so that means we're going to have a part 3 with Whitney, okay? So, listeners, we thank you all for listening in, and we hope that Whitney's transparency has really helped and has opened up your eyes, especially if you're in healthcare. Hopefully, it has encouraged you to ask one more question or maybe 2 more questions, especially as it relates to drug addicts. So, I'm Paula.
I'm Carrie.
And I'm Whitney.
And we thank you for tuning in to the podcast. If you would like to email us, you can email us at
support@reclaim611.org.
Or you can check out the website at
www.reclaim611.org.
All right. Thanks, guys. Until next time.
Bye.
Bye.